It was the summer of 1944, and the skies over northern France were a storm of thunder, steel, and courage. The Allied invasion had turned Europe into a massive front, and every mission flown from England into occupied France carried the weight of history on its wings. On the morning of June 21, Captain Thomas "Tom" Hargrove, a 26-year-old B-17 Flying Fortress pilot from Kansas, stood on the tarmac at RAF Bassingbourn with his crew. They had flown 19 missions together, men who had become brothers bound not by blood but by the cold, roaring engines that carried them through the fire of the Reich's defenses. The orders for the day were simple but deadly: bomb a German munitions depot near Rouen. The intelligence report claimed moderate flak resistance and possible Luftwaffe patrols, but the men knew the truth: there was no such thing as a moderate mission over France. As the four-engine bomber climbed into the dawn, condensation streaking across the canopy, Hargrove could see the endless armada of silver birds stretching across the horizon. The drone of hundreds of engines formed a low, haunting hum, the sound of freedom being forged in the air. Inside the cramped fuselage, the crew settled into their ritual: checks, cross-checks, and jokes whispered over the intercom to chase away the fear. Sergeant Donovan, the tail gunner, hummed jazz tunes through the static. Lieutenant Parker, the navigator, traced routes over the map with the precision of a surgeon. Every man knew his part, every man trusted Hargrove. But halfway across the channel, fate made its move. Radar crackled with enemy intercepts. Messerschmitts had scrambled from a base south of Rouen. The German fighters struck fast, diving out of the sun like falcons. The first pass shredded the left wing of Hargrove's B-17, tearing through the No. 2 engine. The aircraft lurched violently, alarms screamed, and black smoke poured from the engine nacelle. "Feather 2! Feather 2!" shouted Hargrove, but the controls fought him. The fortress began to lose altitude, dropping fast into a wall of anti-aircraft fire that awaited them over the target zone. Every instinct told him to turn back, but the bombs were still aboard, and if they didn't drop them, other crews would have to come again tomorrow. Into the same hell, bullets hammered the fuselage. One fighter made a head-on pass, and glass exploded across the cockpit. Co-pilot James "Red" Whitman slumped forward, blood seeping from his shoulder. "I'm hit, but I'm good," he shouted through clenched teeth. Below them, the munitions depot came into view, a dark blot of concrete and camouflage amid the green fields of France. With one good engine and two coughing, Hargrove kept the bomber steady. "We drop or we die trying," he told his bombardier. The bay doors opened, the wind roared, and the bombs fell, a clean release, a perfect strike. The target erupted in a chain of explosions that lit the clouds from below. But as they turned for home, a shell from a flak battery found its mark, striking the belly and ripping open the fuselage. The fortress was now a wounded giant, bleeding smoke and oil, losing altitude over enemy territory. Flames crept along the port wing, licking dangerously close to the fuel tanks. Inside the cockpit, the heat was unbearable, smoke filling every breath. The intercom crackled with chaos: "We're losing hydraulics. Tail guns jammed. Oxygen's gone in the rear." The B-17 was dying, and every man aboard knew it. Hargrove's gloved hands trembled on the yoke. The altimeter needle spun down: 12,000 feet, 10,000, 8,000. He could see the patchwork of French farmland below, dotted with villages and the thin silver line of a river. "We can't make the channel," Red said weakly. "She's not going to hold together." In that instant, the pilot's training and humanity collided. He had one decision: to order his men to bail out, knowing that meant scattering over occupied territory where capture or death was almost certain, or to try to nurse the crippled bomber back toward Allied lines, risking everyone in the process. "Tom, what's the call?" Parker's voice came over the intercom, tight with fear. Hargrove hesitated for a heartbeat that seemed to stretch across eternity. Then he said the words every airman dreaded: "Prepare to bail out." The crew snapped into motion. The bomb bay doors were useless now, so they gathered near the waist hatch. Parachutes clipped, straps checked, prayers whispered. "Go one by one," shouted Hargrove. "Keep your chutes low and don't bunch up. The first man out was Donovan, disappearing into the blue void. Then the radio operator, then the navigator. One by one, the crew vanished into the sky, their parachutes blooming like white flowers over the French countryside. But when the last man went, the pilot realized something terrifying: the control cables were jammed. The bomber was spiraling now, rolling into a death spin. He was trapped. The hatch behind him had twisted from the explosion, and the fuselage was breaking apart. The co-pilot, still bleeding, grabbed him. "Tom, go. Go now." But Hargrove couldn't. The plane was spinning too violently, and his harness was snagged on the seat rail. He cut it free with his knife, slammed his fist against the canopy glass, and climbed onto the wing as the B-17 tumbled through 4,000 feet. The world was a blur of smoke and fire. Then, he jumped. For a second, there was nothing but the scream of the wind and the sight of his burning aircraft spiraling toward the earth like a dying star. When his parachute finally deployed, it yanked him so hard his vision went white. Hanging there, floating above the fields of France, he watched the B-17 explode on impact far below, the shockwave rippling through the countryside. He was alive. Against all odds, the impossible bailout had worked. But now came the real fight, for survival on the ground. The winter of 1944 was unlike any other in the European theater. The Ardennes forest, silent and buried under a thick layer of snow, became the stage for one of the most desperate and deceptive operations of the Second World War. The German High Command called it Unternehmen Wacht am Rhein, the Watch on the Rhine, but history would remember it simply as the Battle of the Bulge. It was Hitler's last gamble, a final attempt to split the Allied front and recapture the initiative. And leading the armored spearheads of this colossal counteroffensive were hundreds of Panther tanks, the pride of the Panzerwaffe. Their crews, many veterans of the Eastern Front, were confident. They believed they were about to prove once again that no Allied weapon could stop them. But beneath that confidence lay something unspoken: fear. For the first time, Panther commanders were not entirely sure of their superiority. Reports from France had shaken their faith. Rumors swirled that the Americans had a new gun, one capable of piercing their armor even from long range. Few had seen it. Fewer still believed it. But in the cold forests of Belgium, that doubt was about to turn into horror. The attack began on December 16, 1944. Under cover of snow and fog, German armor surged forward through the Ardennes, crashing into lightly held American lines. The initial success was overwhelming. Entire divisions were thrown into chaos. Columns of Shermans were destroyed on roads slick with ice and mud. German morale soared. Once again, the Panthers were on the offensive, their long guns spitting fire, their engines roaring like beasts in the mist. But the euphoria didn't last. As the weather cleared, the Americans regrouped. Reinforcements poured in, veteran tankers from Patton's Third Army, fresh divisions equipped with the M4A3E8 Easy-8 Shermans, and an ever-growing arsenal of 76mm M1 guns. The German advance, once unstoppable, began to slow. It was in these bitter engagements, in frozen towns like Bastogne, Saint-Vith, and Clairvaux, that the myth of the Panther met its reckoning. Panther crews, accustomed to dictating the terms of battle, now found themselves hunted. The Americans had learned from months of experience how to fight their enemy. They no longer charged blindly into ambushes, they stalked their prey, used terrain, called in artillery, and coordinated every movement. The 76mm M1 gun became their equalizer, a precise, fast-firing weapon that turned every encounter into a deadly contest of reflexes and nerves. One account from the 10th Armored Division tells of a duel near Bastogne that perfectly symbolized this reversal of fortune. A Panther, positioned on a ridge, spotted a column of Shermans crossing open ground. It fired, missing its mark by inches. Before the crew could reload, a Sherman Easy-8 returned fire. The 76mm round struck the Panther's turret ring. The result was catastrophic. When Captain Hargrove was brought back to England, he was almost unrecognizable, thin, dirty, his hair matted, eyes hollow. But when his surviving crewmen saw him walk into the debriefing tent, the room erupted in disbelief and tears. They had thought him dead. "You saved us, Skipper," one of them said. And it was true. Had he not ordered the bailout when he did, none of them would have made it out alive. The intelligence officers took his report in silence, realizing how close the mission had come to catastrophe, and how his impossible decision had turned it into a story of survival and courage. In the weeks that followed, Hargrove was recommended for the Distinguished Flying Cross. But he rarely spoke about the medal or the mission. When asked about it years later, he would simply say, "I didn't save anyone. We saved each other." That humility became his legacy. After the war, he returned to Kansas, married, and became a teacher, helping young men who would never know the sound of engines over France understand what courage meant. He never flew again, but he kept a small model of the B-17 on his desk, a silent tribute to the brothers he had lost and the sky that had once nearly taken him. In 1972, Hargrove was invited to France for a reunion with the families who had hidden him. Standing in the same field where he had landed almost 3 decades earlier, he felt the wind against his face and looked up. "It wasn't luck," he said softly. "It was people, ordinary people who refused to let war take their humanity." That moment, captured by a French journalist, became symbolic of what the war had truly been about, not just battles and machines, but choices made in the quiet moments between life and death. Today, his story lives on in the archives of the U.S. Air Force, a testament to what one man's courage can do when everything seems lost. His impossible bailout wasn't just a miracle of survival, it was a reminder that even in the darkest sky, one act of faith can bring everyone home.